The sun rose quietly over the green hills of Sichuan, painting the morning sky in soft strokes of orange and gold. A warm breeze floated over the earth, carrying the sweet scent of wildflowers and tea leaves. In the valley below, a man named Lin Wei stood in his field, his hands touching the soil that had fed his family for generations. He was not rich nor powerful, but in this small patch of land, Lin Wei was king. Beside him, his 12-year-old son Jian picked fresh tea leaves. With care, Jian had his father's calm eyes and his mother's strong hands. Every morning, father and son worked side by side, whispering stories between rows of green tea bushes. "Do you see this leaf?" Jian Lin Wei held up a small, perfect sprig. "This one is ready. Not too young, not too old like you." Jian smiled. He wanted to grow strong, like his father. He wanted to learn everything. But that spring, a change came to Sichuan. It came not with a storm or soldiers, but with soft words, shiny coins, and a strange new plant that some neighbors were beginning to grow, a flower with red and white petals called opium poppy. At first, no one thought much of it. It was beautiful to look at. The seeds sold well. Traders from the coast came offering silver for just a small crop. Some neighbors planted tea, others poppy. But Lin Wei stayed loyal to the land and to tea, until his cousin Liang Bo paid him a visit. "Try this flower, cousin." Liang Bo was once poor like Lin Wei. Now he arrived in a fancy coat, riding a horse to clean for any mountain road. "Cousin," he called, smiling wide. "Still growing tea?" "Yes," Lin Wei replied with a nod, "like my father, and his father before him." Liang Bo laughed. "Times are changing. Cousin, tea is for patience. Silver comes faster with this." He reached into a cloth bag and pulled out a bundle of dried poppy pods. "Opium you grow it once and you'll never worry again." Lin Wei stared at the pods. They looked like little sleeping bells. "What does it do?" "It makes men dream. Healers say it stops pain. Foreigners buy it by the cartload. I sell to Canton. One harvest made me this coat." Jian watched from a distance. He didn't like the way his father's eyes darkened. "I grow food, Bo, not dreams." Liang Bo shrugged. "Dreams buy rice now. But keep your tea if you like poverty." And with that, the horse turned and rode away, leaving dust on the field and doubt in Lin Wei's heart. The poppy apis. A few weeks later, Lin Wei walked through the village. The market was quiet. Tea buyers offered low prices. Some had stopped coming altogether. Instead, strange foreign merchants spoke in loud English at the docks, loading ships with poppy resin, silver, and silk. Jian asked his father, "Why are they speaking like that?" "They're from Britain," Lin Wei said. "They sell goods, and they buy dreams." It was true. The British East India Company had grown rich trading Indian opium for Chinese tea and silk, turning addiction into wealth. They had flooded Canton and coastal cities with opium, and now it spread inland. Soon, even Lin Wei's most loyal friends were switching crops. Tea dried up in warehouses. Opium sold fast. By summer, Lin Wei gave in. Just a small corner of the field, he told himself. Just enough to buy tools, maybe a better roof for winter. The first poppies bloomed like fireworks in the fields of Sichuan. Bright, delicate, deadly. A whisper in the village. Not everyone welcomed the change. Old Lady Mulan, the village healer, spat on the ground when she saw the flowers. "This flower," she said, "is the beginning of a sickness, not of the body, but of the soul." No one listened, not even her own grandson, who had begun to smoke a sticky black tar that made him laugh for hours, then sleep for days. In the evenings, Jian would walk by the river and see men slumped beneath trees, eyes glazed, pipes in hand. Once he saw a mother give a baby a few drops of opium to stop its crying. He felt something heavy in his chest. "Baba," he asked, "why does this flower make people forget?" Lin Wei didn't answer at first. Then he said, "Because some pain runs deep, and some men are too tired to feel anymore." A death that changed everything. It was the end of autumn when tragedy came. Lin Wei's younger son, Bo, just 9 years old, fell ill after playing near a neighbor's opium barn. The fumes, strong and sweet, had made him dizzy. He came home coughing, his small face pale. They called for old Lady Mulan, but she came too late. Bo died in Lin Wei's arms, whispering that the sky smelled like honey. Jian wept at his brother's side. Lin Wei screamed in the night. His wife stopped speaking. The poppy field was burned the next morning. The return to honor neighbors were shocked. "You're mad," Liang Bo said, hearing of the fire. "You burned money." "I burned poison," Lin Wei answered, eyes hollow, "and I will not sell poison for gold." The emperor himself, in Beijing, had begun to hear the cries from the south. Commissioner Lin Zaxu, a strong and brave official, had been appointed to stop the trade. He wrote letters to Queen Victoria, demanding the end of opium sales. But the British would not stop. Lin Wei knew war was coming, not just of swords, but of souls. He called Jian to his side. "We will grow tea again," he said, "even if it makes us poor, even if no one buys. Let others chase silver, we will keep our honor." Jian nodded. "And if they bring war, then we fight." A new chapter begins. A year had passed since Lin Wei burned his poppy field. The flames had died, but their smoke seemed to linger in the air, not on his land, but in the hearts of the people around him. The village had changed. Some grew richer, their houses now lined with brick walls and shiny red lanterns, but many more had grown hollow, their eyes tired, their spirits lost. Jeon was now 14. The loss of his younger brother had changed something in him. He spoke less but watched more. His hands worked hard in the tea fields, but his thoughts often wandered far beyond the hills of Sichuan. He wanted to understand the world, how it could reward poison and punish honor. One morning, Lin Wei called his son to the wooden table, where a cloth bundle lay waiting. "I've spoken to Master Liu," he said. "He has family in Canton, a tea warehouse. You will go there and work for them. Learn how the trade works. Learn how the foreigners trade dreams for silver. Learn their ways." Jian's heart pounded. Canton. Lin Wei nodded. "I've taught you the ways of the soil. Now learn the ways of the sea. You will not stay forever, just long enough to know what's coming." That same week, Jian left Sichuan with a cart of dried tea and a note from Master Liu. He wore simple robes and carried no weapon, only a carved jade pendant from his mother and the memory of his brother's pale face. The journey to Canton took weeks. Jian traveled by ox cart through green valleys, then boarded a riverboat along the Yangtze. Along the way, he saw the signs of change everywhere: foreign boats with black sails, armed escorts on bridges, and villages where silver coins danced, more than rice bowls. When he finally reached the bustling port city of Canton, he stood breathless at its scale. This was not like home. Tall buildings lined the harbor, and narrow streets overflowed with carts, merchants, and shouting voices in dozens of languages. The Pearl River shimmered with dozens of ships, Chinese junks, British clippers, and massive opium freighters that floated like ghosts. The air smelled of spices, smoke, and something sickly sweet. Opium Chen stepped off the boat and clutched his jade pendant. This place was a different world. Master Lin of Canton. The tea warehouse was owned by Lin Howren, a distant cousin of Jian's father. He was thin, sharp-eyed, and always counting something: coins, crates, or time. "Your father has honor," Howren said, examining Jian. "I hope you brought that with you." "In Canton, it's rare," Jian bowed. "I came to learn." "Good, then learn fast." Howren housed Jian in a small room above the warehouse. Every morning before sunrise, Jian swept the floors, packed crates of tea, and helped load carts. By day, he studied trade documents and watched the boats at the harbor. By night, he wrote letters to his parents, telling them about the city, but never about the things that disturbed him most. He had begun to notice a pattern. The tea shipments were shrinking, but the boats leaving the harbor were growing fuller, not with silks or rice, but with chests of opium. And every week, more young men from the city disappeared into the opium dens. Dark, smoke-filled rooms where dreams cost silver and lifetimes. The House of Clouds. One night, out of curiosity and anger, Jian followed a group of boys to one of these dens. It was called the House of Clouds, a name soft enough to hide the pain inside. The room was dimly lit with oil lamps, the air thick with a haze that smelled like burning sweetness. Inside, young men, some his age, lay on mats, their eyes rolled back, thin pipes in hand. Their limbs twitched like broken marionettes. Some smiled with empty joy. Others wept as if dreaming of ghosts. One man coughed blood into a cloth and didn't even look surprised. "Why do they come here?" Jian whispered to the man at the door. "To forget," the man replied. Not unkindly, Jian walked out, choking on the air he would never forget. The arrival of the warships by spring. The British ships in the harbor had doubled, and they were no longer just merchant ships. They carried cannons. Jian watched as one of the ships fired a shot into the sea, a demonstration. The sailors said, but the message was clear. They were not just here to trade. Tensions were rising. The Qing government had begun seizing opium shipments in Canton. Commissioner Lin Zexu, appointed by the emperor, had arrived to clean the poison out of the city. He was brave and direct. He ordered thousands of opium chests destroyed. He even wrote a letter to Queen Victoria demanding an end to the trade. Jian listened as Master Howren read the translation of the letter aloud in the warehouse. "We have heard that your country forbids opium at home, yet you sell it to ours. Is this justice?" But justice, Jian would learn, was not always written in letters. Sometimes it was written in fire. The first bombardment, the response from the British came not in words, but in gunpowder. It began with a thunderclap. One of the British warships fired on a Chinese fort at the river mouth. Smoke rose. Panic spread. The first Opium War had begun. Jian was helping move crates when he heard the explosion. He ran to the docks and saw people screaming, boats overturned, soldiers running. British Marines had landed on shore. They moved like machines, organized, armed, and merciless. The Chinese soldiers, poorly equipped and confused, were pushed back easily. Jian stood frozen until Master Howren pulled him by the collar. "Back to the warehouse," he yelled. "This is not your fight." But Jian wasn't sure that it was true. Wasn't this everyone's fight? Smoke over Canton. In the following weeks, chaos reigned. Canton was under siege. Smoke rose day and night from burned homes, shops, and boats. Opium dens stayed open, even in war. Addiction did not rest. Jaeon saw a man trade his wife's necklace for a single pipe. He saw soldiers looting markets. He saw a British officer shoot a boy for stealing bread. Something broke in him. He returned to the House of Clouds, not to smoke, but to shout, "You are dying in your sleep," he cried. "Our country burns, and you lie here like animals." No one answered. One man simply asked, "Is it burning?" "Then let it burn." Jian left heart on fire. He began to write letters again, this time not to his family but to Commissioner Lin Zexu himself. In those letters Jian described what he saw, the dens, the deaths, the ships, the poison, silver. He never got a reply, but he kept writing, because silence, he believed, was part of the sickness. The boy and the dragon one evening. As he watched the ships in the harbor, Jian whispered a quiet vow to the wind. "I am only a tea farmer's son, but I will not watch my country die in smoke." He didn't know it yet, but that vow would carry him from Canton's docks to the heart of a burning empire. His fight was only beginning. The letter that never came. The skies over Canton were still dark when Jian boarded the merchant boat bound for home. The port city, once filled with color and clamor, was now choked by gray. Smoke rose from distant buildings, boats floated like burnt leaves. War was still brewing, but Jian's reason to leave had nothing to do with fear. A letter had arrived from Sichuan written by Master Lu, not his father. "Your mother is unwell, and the poppy has returned to your village." Jian read those words, over and over. He didn't sleep that night. He packed only what he needed, the jade pendant, some silver coins, and a packet of letters he'd written to Commissioner Lin. He promised Master Howren he would return, though his eyes said otherwise. Now, on the boat, Jian looked at the burning coastline and clenched his fists. He had seen what opium could do to cities. He prayed he wouldn't see it in his own home. Return to a different home. By the time Jian reached the outskirts of Sichuan, the harvest season was ending. The air smelled of cut hay and drying leaves, but something was different. He passed homes with glass windows, a luxury few once had, new carts, bright red doors, but no laughter. No one greeted him. Faces were tired, eyes sunken. When he reached his family's fields, his heart dropped. The tea bushes were gone. In their place stood rows and rows of tall poppy stalks, their flowers already cut, the sticky black resin drying in little bowls. Jaeon dropped to his knees. No, the reunion inside the family home. His mother lay on a mat, barely conscious. Her breath was shallow. Her once dark hair had gone nearly white. She stirred only when Jaeon held her hand. "Jaeon," she whispered. "I'm here, Ma," he said, choking back tears. "I came as soon as I got the letter." She smiled weakly. "You look strong." In the corner, Lin Wei stood like stone. He looked older, shoulders heavier, face unshaven. "I did what I had to," his father said quietly. "The tea buyers vanished. The rains failed. Your mother fell sick. We needed silver. You swore we'd never grow that poison again, and I swore I'd never let this family starve." The silence between them was louder than war. The village feast that night. Jian walked into the heart of the village. To his shock, there was a celebration. Red lanterns floated in the sky. Drums beat, music played. Men and women danced and drank, under silk CNOPI. At the center sat Liang Bo, Jian's uncle, now fatter and richer than ever. He wore silk robes with British designs and smoked from a long, elegant pipe. Liang called, raising his cup. "The brave boy returns, from the coast. Did you bring us silver or stories?" Jian said nothing. He just stared at the pipe. Liang grinned. "Don't look so grim. We've done well. The poppy pays. Canton may burn, but here we thrive." "You thrive on death," Jian said coldly. "On smoke. I've seen what this flower does," Boy Liang said, rising to his feet. "Dreams sell better than honor now. The world has changed, then the world is sick." Jian turned and walked away. Behind him laughter echoed, hollow and bitter. A burning roof that night. Fire struck the village, not from invaders, but from within. A young man, Bao's childhood friend, now addicted to opium, lit a lamp near a poppy barn while hiding. The flames spread quickly, and within minutes, 3 houses were ablaze. Jian woke to shouting. Smoke filled the sky. Villagers scrambled with buckets and blankets, but the fire fed on dry wood and dreams. One house collapsed completely. The screams inside ended too quickly. Jian ran toward the flames. He helped carry 2 children out of a collapsing hut. One was already gone. When the fire finally died, ash rained on the village like snow. They buried 4 bodies the next day. No one mentioned the cause. No one dared blame the poppy. Words with the wind after the fire. Jian walked alone through the hills. He sat by the same stone where he and his brother once chased dragonflies. He cried. He cried for Bo, for his mother, for his father's silence, for the dream that once was their land. Then, as the wind picked up, he made a decision. If the dragon throne won't stop it, I will. He took out one of the letters he had written to Commissioner Lin. He read it again. This time, the words felt different, stronger, deeper, real. He would rewrite it, not just as a letter but as a declaration. The ink that declared. Jian sat at his father's old wooden table, the moonlight casting silver lines across his rough hands. In front of him was a blank scroll. No more letters to officials, no more waiting for someone else to fix what had broken. He dipped the brush into ink. To every man who has buried a brother, to every mother who has rocked a hollowed child, to every farmer who turned fields of rice into poppy to survive, and to every emperor who still wears silence like a crown, I no longer ask for help, I prepare to fight. When the ink dried, Jian packed the letter into a cloth satchel and tied it to his belt. He wasn't a soldier, but he was done being a witness. The next morning, before sunrise, Jian kissed his sleeping mother's forehead and left a note for his father. "Forgive me, Baba, but I cannot protect this land by planting tea anymore." He didn't look back. The war comes in. Lenjian joined a caravan of imperial volunteers traveling from Chengdu to a war camp forming near Wuhan. The journey took weeks, and every village they passed showed signs of collapse. Temples turned into opium dens. Markets replaced with pawn stools. Children playing beside rusted cannons from an empire that had forgotten how to fight. They heard whispers of battles lost along the coast, Canton bombed, Ningbo taken, and Chinese ships set ablaze. Like paper boats, the British warships were more powerful than anything the Qing Navy had ever seen. But in the inland towns, the spirit of resistance still flickered. They met General Huang, an old but fierce man with a long scar across his nose. He inspected each volunteer with a gaze that could crack bone. When Jian stepped forward, the general asked, "You ever held a sword, boy?" "No," General Jian replied, "but I've seen what opium does to a city, and I will not let it take the soil my family dies to protect." The general stared at him a long time and then nodded. "You'll learn fast." Training in the dust soldier life was brutal. At dawn, Jian trained in sword forms and musket drills. At noon, he marched with iron weights tied to his feet. At dusk, he dug trenches, slept on dirt, and ate boiled roots. But Jian did not complain. His arms bled, his back burned, but every strike of the wooden sword reminded him of Bo's pale body, of his mother's fading breath, of the man in Canton who gave up his soul for one more pipe. He wasn't just training his body, he was shaping his will. The Red River Battle, the first real battle, came near a river that had once been the border between two farming provinces. The British had built a small outpost there, guarding a shipment route. General Huang planned a night raid. "We will not win by strength," the general said, pointing at a dirt map. "We win by surprise." Jian's unit crawled through mud for hours. The sound of frogs and insects masked their approach. Then the first explosion shattered the night. Jian had never seen fire leap from a cannon that way. He saw men scream before falling. He saw the red flash in a soldier's eyes before a bayonet struck his chest, but Jian did not freeze. He remembered the training. He gripped his sword. He charged. The British outpost fell after 2 hours of brutal fighting. Bodies lined the riverbank. The air smelled of blood and gunpowder. Jian knelt beside a fallen Chinese soldier, no older than Bo, and wept. They had won, but the victory tasted like ash. A letter in the mud days after the battle. Jian found a half-burnt letter in the pocket of a dead British officer. It was from a woman in London. "Dearest Thomas, they say this war will make you a man, but I fear it will only make you a stranger. Come back before the smoke makes you someone I don't recognize. Love, Elsie." Jian read it again and again. Even the enemy had mothers. Even the enemy had people waiting for them. The real enemy, he realized, was not just the British soldier. It was the poison they had brought, the greed that made men trade souls for silver, and the cowardice of rulers who let it happen. A symbol is born. Word of the raid spread. Other camps heard of the brave youth from Sichuan who had helped capture a British post. He became known among soldiers as the T-Sun who fights with fire. But Jian refused to take pride in it. He visited the wounded. He carried water. He wrote names of the dead in a notebook so they would not be forgotten. That he was not here to become a legend. He was here to stop a nightmare. The silence after victory. The battlefield had quieted, but the war was far from over. Jian stood atop a grassy ridge overlooking the smoldering valley of Changsha, where just days ago the imperial troops had managed to force back another British advance. His uniform, once clean, was now stained with soot, sweat, and blood. The sword at his side was chipped. His hands were blistered. He had become a soldier not by choice but by heartbreaking. And now a rumor ran through the ranks like a ghost in the wind. The emperor's going to sign. At first, no one believed it. How could the Son of Heaven, ruler of the Middle Kingdom, yield to foreign invaders? But soon, the letters arrived. The war was over, and China had lost an order from the Dragon Throne. That imperial command came on golden parchment, carried by an exhausted courier. "Ceasefire immediately. The treaty has been signed in Nanjing. The British will be given ports, silver, and the island of Hong Kong." Jian read the words slowly, as if they were poison. He turned to General Huang, who stood motionless under a twisted pine. "We fought for this," Jian asked. "We bled for this." The general didn't answer. His eyes were wet. "Sometimes," the old man said finally, "the blade loses to the pen." Jian clenched his fists. But what kind of pen sold pieces of a nation? The Treaty of Nanjing. News of the treaty spread. Jian began to hear details. Each one felt like a cut to the heart. 21 million silver dollars would be paid to the British. 5 port cities including Canton and Shanghai would be opened to foreign trade. The British would gain Hong Kong permanently. British citizens in China would be above Chinese law. And worst of all, nothing was said about stopping the opium trade. The very poison that started the war would now spread freely. The invaders had brought addiction, and China had repaid them with land. Jian fell to his knees and screamed into the wind. The road home there was no parade, no celebration. Just thousands of weary soldiers packing their gear, their pride shattered, their futures uncertain. Jian walked the long road back to Sichuan, this time not as a boy but as a man who had seen cities burn, friends die, and honor sold for coins. He passed towns now filled with British flags and foreign banks. He passed farmers planting more poppy than rice. The air was different. The people were different. And when he reached his village, the gate was open, but the silence was worse than any battle he had seen. A house half empty. Jian stepped into his childhood home and found only one voice waiting. Jian. It was his father, Lin Wei, thinner now, with white streaks in his beard and sunken eyes. Where's Ma? Jian asked, his heart already sinking. Lin Wei pointed to the back room. She had passed away just weeks before. Her final days were quiet. Her final words were soft. Tell Jian I always believed. Jian didn't speak for a full day. He simply sat beside her empty mat, holding her pillow, trying to remember her laughter, not her last breath. He had survived war but came home to find he had still lost a new stranger in the fields. The fields were full now, poppy once again dancing in the breeze. But this time there was something else. British soldiers, 2 men in red coats, laughing, watching over the harvest as if it belonged to them. When Jian approached, one of them raised a hand. Business only, the man said in broken Mandarin. No questions. This is my land, Jian replied coldly. Not anymore. The other soldier smirked. Treaty says otherwise. Jian said nothing. He returned to his father and asked, why didn't you fight them? Lin Wei looked out at the fields and whispered, because I already lost your mother. I couldn't lose you too. The tea bushes rise again that night. Jian walked through the village with a torch. Not to burn anything but to replant. He found a small patch of dirt near their home and dug his hands into the earth. He planted the first tea seedlings since before the war. One by one, others joined him. By morning, 10 tea bushes stood in the soil. By the end of the week, 30. It wasn't about money, it was about remembrance, it was about resistance. Not every war is won with swords, some are fought with roots. The letter to the next emperor. Jian sat down at the same table he once wrote his war letter. This time he wrote to someone who hadn't ruled yet but one day would. To the next emperor of China, the last one signed away the dignity of 1,000 years. He gave away our ports, our pride, and our people's souls. But he did not sign away the land beneath my feet. I plant tea again. And when your day comes, I pray you rise stronger, and never let foreign smoke drown Chinese breath again. He sealed the letter and left it in a carved box beneath the oldest tree in their garden. Maybe one day, someone would read it and remember. A land of smoke and silence. 3 years had passed since the Treaty of Nanjing was signed. 3 years since Jian returned from war to a home without his mother, a country without its pride, and a future buried under smoke. And yet, in those 3 years, something inside him refused to die. The tea bushes Jian had planted behind his home had multiplied slowly, quietly, as if defying the poppy fields that now surrounded them, as if whispering to the land, we are still here. But Jian's change would not come from soil alone. It had to come from the throne. The journey to Beijing. Jian packed only what he needed, a small pouch of dried tea leaves, a clean robe, and a scroll. A second letter, written not to the emperor's advisors, not to generals, but to the emperor himself. The journey to Beijing, the capital, was long and dangerous. British soldiers now patrolled trade routes, and brigands roamed freely, robbing travelers with impunity. Jian traveled disguised as a merchant's assistant, carrying a cart filled with baskets of herbs and oils, but he wasn't there to sell. He was there to see. What he saw chilled him more than any battlefield ever had. The hollow throne bay, once the shining heart of the Middle Kingdom, now sat bloated and bruised. The forbidden city, once untouchable, had cracks in its walls and foreign banners outside its gates. Jian walked past European soldiers drinking wine outside former palaces. He saw Chinese nobles laughing with foreign ambassadors, their robes lined with imported silks. Even the imperial court had changed. He watched a procession, what used to be a solemn ritual reduced to a polite performance for British diplomats. Servants whispered that the emperor rarely left his quarters. Some claimed he no longer ruled at all. Who leads us now? Jian asked a tea seller near the palace. The old man laughed bitterly. Whoever holds the pipe. And they all smoked now, even the ones with dragon robes. The addict in the hall. Jian found proof of those words when he gained entry to the outer court. Disguised as a servant to a minor noble, he swept the tiled floors and trimmed the palace hedges. It was enough to glimpse what the empire had become. One morning, he was ordered to deliver a tray of fruit to the western wing. Inside a gold-paneled room sat a prince, young, beautiful, and broken. His eyes were half closed, his lips stained dark. An opium pipe rested gently between 2 fingers. He didn't even notice Jian enter. Is that the peaches? The prince slurred. Yes, your highness, Jian whispered. Good. Put them there, and don't speak of this." The prince waved his hand lazily and inhaled. Jian stood frozen for a moment. Watching the son of dragons drown in smoke, he bowed and backed away. But in that moment, a decision was made deep in Jian's heart. "If the emperor cannot speak, I will." The petition. It took 3 weeks of careful work, whispered messages, and coined bribes to get Jian's petition delivered to the hands of a royal reader. It was written in the clearest Mandarin, every character deliberate and sharp. "Your Majesty, I write, not as a soldier, nor scholar, but as a son of this soil, a son of a mother who died in pain, a son of a nation still bleeding. Our fields are red with poppies, our people are grey with smoke, the dragon's wings are folded, his breath is borrowed, his crown foreign polished. Rise, not for me, not for war, but for memory. Let the world know China remembers who she is." The petition disappeared into the palace. Jian waited 3 more weeks. No reply came. A whisper in the garden one evening. As Jian walked near the Imperial Gardens, a young servant girl approached him. She carried a folded letter. "No seal," she said. "Only." He read it, then vanished into the hedges. Jian opened the letter slowly. "Son, the dragon sleeps, not by choice. The fire inside him is poisoned. The throne cannot rise until the smoke clears. But your words will not be forgotten. There are still embers in the ash." There was no name, but Jian recognized the handwriting. It was the same style he saw on the walls of old scrolls. The emperor himself had replied, and though it was not the answer Jian had hoped for, it was more than he expected. It meant he had been heard. Seeds in the capital. Jian did not return to Sichuan right away. Instead, he found a small courtyard in the southern district of the capital near the river, near the poor. He began teaching children how to grow tea. At first, only 2 came, then 5, then 20. He told them the history of the land, the stories of Emperor Taizu, the strength of China before opium, the power of honesty and hard work. Soon, the courtyard became known as the Smoke-Free School, not a grand revolution, but a beginning. The day the smoke lifted on the last day of spring that year, a wind swept through Beijing. For the first time in weeks the sky was clear, no haze, no stench of burning. Jian sat with his students beneath a cherry blossom tree. He poured them tea not from silver pots, but from an old clay kettle. "This," he said, holding the cup, "is what our ancestors built. This is what we protect, not with fire, not with swords, but with truth." One child raised his hand. "Will the dragon ever wake up?" Jian smiled. "He already has. A little." The quiet before the storm. Beijing had grown colder. It wasn't just the wind sweeping across the ancient tiled roofs, or the way frost clung to the plum blossoms too early in the season. It was in the hearts of the people. A quiet sadness had settled in the city like dust that no one dared sweep away. Foreign banners still flapped outside the banks. British merchants rode in carriages meant for nobles. Chinese citizens bowed to foreign soldiers to pass through their own streets. The court remained silent, the emperor unseen. But amid the sorrow, a small courtyard in the southern district continued to bloom. Jian's Smoke-Free School, once a tiny patch of rebellion, now welcomed children of servants, former soldiers, even orphans. They grew tea, they learned to write, they heard stories not of battles, but of dignity, sacrifice, and home. In Jian, no longer a boy, no longer just a soldier, had become something rarer in this age, a teacher, the child of the crown. One cold afternoon, a mysterious guest arrived at the school gates. She wore plain robes and a faced veil, but her carriage bore the golden symbol of the royal court. Jian met her at the gate. "I am Mei," she said softly. "I'm here because someone sent me, someone who wears silence but reads everything." She pulled from her sleeve a small scroll, sealed with a symbol Jian had only seen once before in the hidden letter he received from the emperor. Mei looked around the garden at the children planting seeds. "He says you have built more than any minister in the court." "I only plant tea," Jian said. "You've replanted the soul," Mei replied. She turned to go, but paused. "He wants you to write again. One last letter." The final ink. Jian sat in his room that night, with a brush in hand. The candle flickered. Beside him, the same table, the same ink. But this time, he didn't write in anger or desperation. This letter was a testament. "The dragon, thrown awake or sleeping. This is my last letter. I have seen war. I have seen fire eat children. I have seen smoke take the eyes of poets and poison the fingers of kings. But I have also seen something else. I have seen a 6-year-old girl lift a teapot with perfect form. I have seen a boy whose father died in the war write a poem that made a room cry. I have seen honor return not to palaces, but to gardens. You may not be able to break the chains of silver, but know this, the spirit is not dead. It waits, it breathes beneath the ashes, and one day when the smoke clears, it will rise like tea steam in the morning, clear, strong, and rising toward the sun. Until then, I teach. Until then, I remember." Jian, son of the tea fields. When the children sang, weeks passed. Then months. Winter came. One morning, a government official arrived at the school unannounced, but he wasn't carrying weapons. He was carrying books. "We are told this school will now be protected," he said, "by order of ... well, by someone who can't be named." Behind him came tools, paper, ink, tea seeds and a royal decree. Education was to begin in 4 more villages, modeled after Jaeon's garden. Jaeon did not cry, but he bowed, not to the man, not to the emperor, to the future. That day, as snow fell lightly on the rooftop tiles, the children of the smoke-free school gathered beneath the cherry tree and began to sing. It wasn't a hymn, it was a poem Jian had taught them. We are the roots, we are the steam, we are the cup of the morning dream, we hold the leaf, we serve the land, we rise not by sword, but by steady hand. Epilogue. The last ember years passed. The Second Opium War would come, more treaties, more shame, but something that had already begun beneath it all, a quiet rebellion, not of fire, but of memory. Jaeon never held power, but his students became teachers, poets, doctors, leaders. When the emperor finally passed and the court fell into ruin, they carried something that could not be stolen, the truth that even when a dynasty bends to smoke, people can still breathe hope, and deep in the soil of Sichuan, beside a patch of tea older than any throne, rests Gian's final letter sealed in a clay box beneath the roots, waiting for the next dragon to read. Years after the smoke, the Qing Empire had fallen. The forbidden city was silent. Gone were the dragon ropes, the pearl-stitched thrones, the censored scrolls. China stood at a crossroads, broken from within and invaded from without. Flags rose and fell. Generals declared themselves emperors. Foreign powers drew lines across maps that were never theirs. But far from the sound of bullets and politics, in a village at the edge of Sichuan, a small tea garden still stood. The gate bore no flag, only a wooden sign with faded characters. Truth grows here. And beneath the cherry blossom tree, children still gathered just as they had in Gaon's time. He was gone, now laid to rest beside his mother. Beneath a circle of stone carved with the words, "Smoke fades, roots remain." The return of a sun one autumn, a stranger came to the garden. He was tall, dressed in a modern uniform, but bore the humble posture of a farmer. His name was Liang Tao, and he had traveled across war-torn provinces carrying nothing but a small box wrapped in silk. Inside that box was a copy of Jian's final letter. "My grandfather wrote this," Liang Tao said softly. "He was one of Jian's students. Before he died, he told me to return here and plant the last seed." He opened his palm and showed a single tea seed, smooth and dark as river stone. The children of the school gathered around, and together they planted it beneath the roots of the old cherry blossom tree. A new dynasty of thought in the cities. Revolution stirred. No more emperors. No more opium. A new republic was born, rough and uncertain, like a child just learning to walk. There were still wars, still chaos, but also, for the first time in generations, the possibility of self-rule. Among the ministers of this rising republic were 3 men who had one thing in common. They had all studied at Gian's smoke school. One became a doctor who refused to prescribe opium. One became a poet whose words were chanted in protests. One became an educator who built schools in 12 provinces. Together, they formed what came to be known in secret as the Leaf Society, a quiet movement that believed China's true revolution would not come from weapons or rulers, but from remembering who they were. They carried scrolls, not rifles. They taught peasants to read and to plant. They wore pins in the shape of tea leaves, and in every school they built, they placed a plaque with 5 words. He taught, "We remembered, we rise." The day the emperor's son came one spring day, a man arrived at the original Sichuan garden with a heavy coat and a silk-covered face. He was older, with silver in his hair and guards at his side, but when he entered the garden, he asked for no titles. He sat among the children and watched them pour tea. After an hour, he stood and said, "I am the last son of the last emperor, and I have lived my whole life ashamed. But I heard your teacher's name in places even my father's name is forgotten." He removed his family's ancient seal from a pouch, a piece of jade shaped like a dragon's eye, and placed it on the garden's stone table. "Let the new China be ruled by memory, not thrones." He left it there and walked away without guards, without fear, without shame. The fire returns. Differently decades later, when foreign invaders once again marched across the land, the people of Sichuan resisted, but this time they did not fight alone. Messages were passed in teacups. Soldiers carried banners, not of lions, but of leaves. Even in prison camps, prisoners whispered verses from Gaon's letters, reciting them like prayers. They can burn the fields, but not the roots. They can silence mouths, but not the truth. Even some foreign soldiers stopped to listen. Even some began to question their orders. Such is the power of stories, such is the power of a seed. A letter found in the rain-on stormy evening. A young girl named Zhao Lingrate, granddaughter of one of Jian's first students, found a scroll hidden beneath a loose stone in the garden wall. Waterlogged but legible. The ink read, "If you are reading this, then the war is not over. The war never ends. Not as long as men trade memory for gold. But if you still plant, if you still teach, then I am still alive. And you, child, are the emperor now." She copied the scroll and placed the original in the garden shrine. Then she grew up to become a teacher, and her students built a tea garden on a mountain above Shanghai. Then another in Chongqing. Then another near the ruins of the Forbidden City. The final scene. The garden at dawn. 100 years had passed since the first Opium War. Tourists now visit old palaces, they take photos, they buy replicas of dragon robes. But only some find the small trail that leads to the tea garden at Sichuan. There are no gift shops. Only wind. And children. They still wear plain robes, they still pour tea, and on a stone table in the center sits a single phrase, carved deep and strong: truth grows here. The Great Wall we cannot sit had been nearly 30 years since Jian's ashes were buried beneath the garden. Stone. His tea school still bloomed in Sichuan, but the world around it had changed. Trains now cut through mountains, factories blew smoke above the skyline. There were new rulers now, those who didn't wear dragon robes, but instead uniforms and pins. They spoke of unity and strength. They spoke of rebuilding China, but some of them had forgotten Gaian's words, and some had begun selling dreams again, not in poppy fields, but in pills and powders whispered in alleys and hidden in trucks. A new kind of poison had returned, and this time it wore a modern face. The girl named Lianyan was 17. She was born on a tea mat in the garden Jian built. Her mother had been one of his students. Her grandfather had been rescued by Jian during the First Opium War, and though Lian had never seen the great teacher, she spoke of him like family. She tended the garden with the same reverence others gave temples. She poured tea with hands so steady. Even monks watched her in awe, but behind her calm eyes was fire. She had heard stories of a new shiny, white, faster king, and far more dangerous than the old smoke. It was being sold in the cities. And just 2 weeks ago, a boy from their village Dao was found lying near the market, shaking, coughing, and whispering, "I saw colors in the sky." He never woke up. The meeting in the bamboo room. Lian called a meeting beneath the bamboo roof of the garden. 10 young people came, all students of the school. Sons of farmers, daughters of cooks. One boy had only one arm. One girl had scars across her palms from carrying coal. Lian placed a small bag of white powder on the table. "This," she said, "is not opium." The room went silent. "It's worse." "How did you get it?" someone asked. "I traded a bottle of tea oil for it." The seller thought I was weak. He was wrong. "What do we do?" asked Ren, the one-armed boy. "We don't burn this," she said. "We burn the root." The plan. They named themselves the Quiet Hands in honor of Jian, who taught that revolutions don't always need noise. They didn't carry guns. They carried scrolls. They didn't fight with fists. They fought with knowledge, gardens, and storytelling. One planted tea in the alley behind a drug den. One painted murals of Jian on abandoned walls. One hacked into a local radio station and played only one thing for 12 hours. He taught. "We remembered, we rise." Lian and Ren printed thousands of small scrolls and left them in the shoes of factory workers. Some were thrown away, some were burned, but some were read. The son of the general. The true test came when a man named General Wei Jun visited the village. He had heard of the garden, he had heard of the poems, but his real concern was his son, who had gone missing for 3 days. They found him beneath a bridge, addicted to the new drug. When the general saw him, he broke. He didn't speak for a full day. Then, quietly, he came to the garden and asked Lian, "Did Jian leave any instructions for this?" Lian handed him a teacup and a folded scroll. "No instructions," she said, "only remembrance." The empire of leaves word spread fast. The Quiet Hands expanded to 30 villages, then 100. Foreign drugs were still smuggled in, but fewer hands reached for them. Children painted tea leaves on their school walls. Old men started teaching poetry again, and every week a new garden was planted in a place that once sold poison. Not everyone understood, not everyone supported them. Some said they were just children playing monk, but others, as teachers, even police officers, chose silence no more. And as the whispers grew louder, the air began to shift. The day the truck stopped, it happened in the city of Luzhou. Truck filled with synthetic powder, labeled as fertilizer, was set to unload at the docks. But at the last checkpoint, a single tea sprout had been placed in front of the wheel. Its roots dug into the cracks of the road. The driver stopped. Something about it unnerved him. He opened the back of the truck and never drove again. Instead, he joined the Quiet Hands. The image of that little green leaf blocking a truck of poison became a symbol. It was printed in secret newspapers. It was carved into temple walls, and one day it was worn as a pin by a lawmaker in Beijing. The new throne. There is no emperor now, no jade seal, no dragon gates, but in the National Garden Museum there is a simple wooden table behind glass. On it sits a clay teapot. A scroll beside it reads, asterisk, asterisk, in a time of smoke. A boy planted. In a time of silence. A girl remembered. The throne we sit on now is not gold, it is soil. Asterisk, asterisk. And in Sichuan, beneath the cherry tree, new hands pour tea every morning, still quiet, still strong, still free. When the foreigners returned, the docks of Shanghai were alive again, not with the same smoke that once stole China's breath, but with the polished boots of diplomats, media cameras, and powerful foreign CEOs. It had been announced globally, China to host the new International Summit on Addiction Recovery and Moral Economics, a fancy name, a heavy responsibility, across the ocean. The world had seen something strange happening. A nation once destroyed by drugs had become the only one reversing addiction rates, not with technology, not with prisons, but with gardens, memory, and a girl named Lian. By now Lian was 27. She wore no makeup, no suits, no medals, only a robe of light cotton and a silver leaf pin at her collar. She walked into the conference hall barefoot. The crowd, mostly rich men in expensive watches, stared, but she didn't flinch. She stood at the front and poured a cup of tea. Then she said, "Before you talk policy, sip this. This is what saved my people. This is Gion's fire, and you are drinking it." The world listens at first. They laughed. Behind closed doors, one British advisor muttered, "The girl is charming, but this isn't real policy. This is poetry." But then came the data. Over 400 quiet hands chapters across China. 28% drop in drug dependency in rural provinces. 11 international cities now piloting memory gardens inspired by Jian. To 0% relapse rate among those who completed the full tea restoration program. Suddenly, the girl in robes was no longer charming. She was dangerous. She had an idea that worked. The fire behind the leaf Leon was invited to speak again. This time, they expected charts. She brought a story. She held up a photo of Dao, the boy who died when she was a teenager. Then she held up a crumpled drug bag from that same year. Then she pulled out a wooden spoon and a tea seed wrapped in silk. "This," she said, holding up the bag, "is speed. It burns fast, it empties fast, it sells fast. This," she said, holding the seed, "takes time, it grows in silence. But when it blooms, it feeds for generations." The room didn't clap. The room didn't speak. The room just listened. Oh, threat in the wind. Not everyone was pleased. Powerful cartels, both foreign and domestic, had already begun to lose market share to Gion's gardens. An anonymous letter was sent to Lian's school in Sichuan. "Stop spreading your truth, or your leaves will burn." She read it aloud to her students, then tore it in half. "Let them come," she said. "Fire fears water, smoke fears wind, but no one fears a leaf until it breaks through stone." That night, 20 new gardens were planted. The attack that failed 2 weeks later. Masked men tried to torch the Sichuan garden. They failed. Because the garden was no longer one place. Every home nearby had grown tea in secret. Every street child had memorized a poem. Every grandmother carried scrolls in her apron by the time the attackers reached the center. They were surrounded not by guards, but by grandfathers holding teacups, whispering giants' words like spells. The attackers dropped their torches. One of them, just 16 years old, sat down and cried. Lian wrapped him in a blanket. She didn't call the police. She called a teacher. The summit's final day the final day of the summit. Leaders from 41 countries gathered in a marble hall for the closing address. Most expected a politician to speak instead. The room darkened. A hologram of a single tea leaf rotated above them. Then Jian's voice played, restored from old scrolls and passed. "Through generations they can poison the ocean, but not the root beneath. They can silence the trumpet, but not the boy who still breathes. You want power, then plant something. That is the fire they fear most." When the lights returned, Lian stood at the center, and every leader in that room stood with her. Legacy. Beyond borders. Months later, Brazil established its first Jian Academy. Kenya followed. New York placed a single tea plant in Times Square. In India, a school named Beneath the Ashes taught street kids poetry in 5 languages. On its wall, Gion's final letter, translated into Hindi. And in every place it reached, addiction numbers dropped, not overnight, but surely. Quietly. Like roots. The throne that grows back in Sichuan. Lian tended the original garden. She now walked with a limp, an injury from a protest gone wrong. She smiled anyway. She poured tea for an old man who had come from far away. He asked, "Are you a queen now?" She laughed. "No," she said, "but I've built a throne." He looked around. "I don't see it." She pointed to a patch of soil. "There," she said. "It just hasn't bloomed yet."